Alright, jumping right into this, we're going to be starting off with a basic polyplane. And with this basic polyplane, we're going to be enabling our Fibermesh settings under the Tools palette. We have to preview it in order to correctly see it in the viewport too, so take note of that. Now with a sample Fibermesh, let's do a BPR render and see what we got. Alright, let's put the lights a little bit and see if we can help enhance it a little bit further. Not much, but let's take the matte cap that we have and change it to Hair 02, because that's going to be the matte cap that we're going to be using this entire video. Alright, let's do another BPR render. Okay, hey, that looks better. Doing these BPR renders is going to correctly inform us what we need to work on, and playing with the lights is going to further enhance our hair cards more. The render and the lights go hand in hand, so we're going to be modifying these throughout this entire process. So tweaking the Fibermesh settings, what we're really looking to do is to average out our settings and create a nice neutral clump of Fibermesh hair that we can work with. Not too many strands, not too little strands. It shouldn't look like a super large and voluminous piece of hair. Some of the values that matter the most are the segments though. You want to max out your segments down there because that's going to allow us to manipulate our Fibermesh with more segments in the actual geometry of the mesh. So once we click accept and we actually have the Fibermesh now as a subtool, we're going to need to actually correctly display it in our viewport. Alright, look at that render. Not too bad. Oop, I pushed the wrong preview button. Let's unselect that, and under BPR settings, or yeah, preview settings, fast preview. Now we can actually see our Fibermesh correctly in our viewport. Awesome. And there's our render. Very cool. Alright, let's duplicate our Fibermesh and start playing with it via the transpose tool. The transpose tool is, we're going to be using this all the time. It's how we're going to modify our Fibermesh. It's how we're going to play with it. One of the things to take note of is by default with the transpose tools is that we have to uncheck auto mask Fibermesh, which we just unchecked right there. That's going to allow us to actually move the whole subtool. Otherwise, it gets locked out on top of the root of the actual strands. So now we can use our move tool and just start moving it around. And now we're going to start moving this Fibermesh around. I'm going to use the groom brush. There I'm going to use groom turbulence with a lower intensity, kind of just breaking up. See how it just kind of breaks up the Fibermesh a little bit? Kind of doesn't keep it as straight as it used to be. Kind of doesn't make it as linear as it used to be. And because I have two subtools on there right now, I'm kind of like hiding them and looking at each one individually, just trying to get a grasp of what I actually have in my scene right now. So here I have both my subtools enabled and visible, and I'm going to duplicate another one. Here I am moving it back a little bit, trying to fake some depth. I'm going to pull it down. I'm trying to define some clumping with this card, or with this Fibermesh that will eventually become a card. A lot of this is experimentation. Unless you have a strict idea on what you actually want to create, it's going to require you just play around with your Fibermesh and also your light source. So you can see from a side perspective how I'm faking this fall off right there. the whole card has a slight angle to it. And I'm not afraid of duplicating my subtool and just keep moving it around. I need to fill, I need to get more coverage in this card. As we continue to move forward, you're probably going to be surprised in how much duplicating of the subtools that we're going to be doing. While I typically like to work by isolating each subtool, you can see here I'm using the pinch tool just to kind of like bring in the bottom section a little bit more. Right now I'm trying to just get like a nice base. I'm kind of focusing more on the primary forms of what this Fibermesh hair card texture will be. It's important to get your base silhouette down before you work on any details. And I'm just trying to get the foundational Fibermesh subtools I need to go forward. And by using Groom Tuber Lens, which I'm a big fan of, I'm just kind of going to keep moving it around. Yeah, and turn off Auto Mask Fibermesh. Every brush you have, that's turned on by default, which is kind of super frustrating. Unless you turn them automatically off on all of them and then save your preferences, which I did not, you will have to turn off Auto Mask Fibermesh on every single brush you use. Just again, right there. And here I am using the transpose tool again. I'm going to continue using that by either scaling it, deforming it, using the pinch tool to bring it in a little bit more, kind of just using anything I got. It's kind of just brute forcing it by any means necessary. Don't be afraid of kind of manhandling this Fibermesh. I wasn't. You just got to move it around and make it do what you want it to do. All right, more move tool, more transpose tool. You're going to be seeing a lot of that. I mean, this whole workflow is pretty much move tool, transpose tool, and a few grooming brushes. For the sake of time, let's speed this up a little bit and check out what we're doing. More duplication. We're going to be moving our mesh around, trying to get like some aesthetic looking like direction in our Fibermesh strands. Here I am using the Groom Blower. The Groom Blower is a great brush to try and blow it out a little bit more. And then using the pinch tool to kind of bring it back in. Just trying to create some nice directionality there. And then I'm kind of placing it back a little bit more to see how it kind of layers. And again, I'm rendering out in the BPR viewer while playing with my lights a little bit. Still playing around a little bit. Another thing I'm going to try is increasing the radius in my Fibermesh settings for my subtool. Increasing the radius of your fibers actually gives them more volume without having to increase the actual geometry count at all. So there we go. Increase the radius to like 2, just to see what we can play with. We'll be playing with the radius a lot more in the future. Very cool. Kind of bringing it in at the bottom and kind of bringing it out in the middle. I'm trying to think about how I can get some of these shapes to wrap around each other in a more of aesthetically pleasing way. I'm trying to get that hair or these Fibermesh hair strands to kind of clump more and have more directionality with one another. More rendering helps inform what I'm doing. I take this one strand right here and kind of bring it in a little bit more with the pinch tool, using the pinch tool, move tool. Again, I'm soloing my meshes just because it's just a lot easier to kind of view what I'm actually making when I'm isolating each subtool and modifying it. And there I am playing with the length a little bit, trying to get like a taper at the bottom. I'm still working on the overall shape and alpha of what the intention of this hair, of this Fibermesh hair should be. I haven't been working on any of the nitty-gritty details or secondary forms. I'm still working on the primary form and trying to think about how this is going to play into my alpha, because the whole point of making these textures is to create a nice alpha with a very nice supporting diffuse texture. So I'm still working on trying to and thinking about what my alpha is going to look like, and in turn, our diffuse should help drive the alpha. So I'm trying to get some interesting tapering at the bottom. I kind of like what I got going right there. I have some overlapping strand shapes, which is kind of nice, but it's not that hot yet. It still leaves much to be desired. So I'm just going to keep moving it around. And here we are duplicating another subtool. We're going to make a skinny one this time. This one's going to be a skinny subtool, skinny strand. And we're actually going to increase the radius of it too. So we're going to add more volume, and we're going to start deleting some of the strands that we have. We want a reduction in this particular subtool strand. So we're hiding them by hiding the roots right there. So I'm going to keep playing with it. More groom turbulence. Going to skinny it up a little bit more. Skinny, skinny. Let's move it around. Oh, that pinch tool. Pinch tool comes in handy. Maybe this could work. Okay. Alright, we're kind of stacking that on top a little bit. See if we can work on our edges. Okay, that's interesting. Duplicate it out a little bit more. Now that I got this skinny subtool, I can kind of start duplicating it a little bit more. Start using it in different places and in different ways. I'm going to make this one a little bit shorter, kind of taper out a little bit. Be kind of like more of a flyaway one. Flyaway strand. That's interesting. Okay, we're going to duplicate this one, kind of move it around. Let's see what we want to do with that. Maybe we're going to pull it out a little bit more and duplicate some of the strand counts. Sometimes we just have too many, sometimes we'd have to have too many strands in our subtool, and we want to lighten the load, make it disappear less voluminous. And we can do that by hiding the roots of the subtool strands and then deleting hidden. Oh, ZC Manager crashed. That's a bummer. Okay, more duplication. We're going to move it around a little bit more. Still working on that base silhouette in my primary forms. Softening this one up a little bit. Still trying to focus on getting a nice tapering at the bottom right there. Previewing it in my BPR render mode, adjusting my radius a little bit, bringing it down. At the core of what I'm doing, I'm really just focusing on trying to get like an aesthetic looking silhouette on on this card while making sure that the primary forms of the fiber mesh themselves play off each other nicely. Now that we have a bunch of subtools in play, and modifying them all together can be kind of difficult, it's best to use the transpose tool master to send them all into one scene as one mesh, and then from here we can start modifying all of the subtools at once. And the way I'm going to do this is by using the transpose tool to just keep modifying them, bringing them out. From the side's perspective, I'm going to kind of pull it out more to get more of a tapering effect. Hopefully this will help with my lighting. Hopefully I'll get some nice specular in there. But as you can see, once I sent it over via the transpose tool master, it's one gigantic mesh that I can then modify together as a whole, which is really nice. It's very convenient. And then when I'm finished modifying it, I can just send it back over and all my subtools will be spit back out again. And then I can look at my results, which, hey, it's starting to look better. It's actually starting to look like a real texture right now. So that's exciting. So I'm gonna keep working on it because there's still a lot of work to do. But now we know that once we have a bunch of subtools in play, we can transpose tool master them all over and modify them together as a gigantic mass. I'm going to keep modifying this. I'm going to break off this larger mid-sized clump right now. I'm liking where my silhouette's going now. It's starting to look more like a hair card. Sometimes I duplicate things just to experiment. You can't be afraid of just like duplicating subtools and just trying new things. I mean, a lot of this is experimentation. Here I am, I'm duplicating this one particular subtool, and I'm kind of stacking it in front of the other ones. Will it work? I don't know, but I'm going to try it. It's starting to get better. I can see how that one particular strand is starting to clump up on top of all the other ones. So I'm going to use the Groom Tuber lens brush and kind of mess it up a little bit. That's interesting. But you can start seeing the clumping within the fiber mesh. It doesn't all feel like one just gigantic lump of hair. It actually feels like individual clumps interplaying off one another, which is what we want. Looking at that, I can see 3 separate clumps right there. Let's take this one out, duplicate it, make it skinny, delete some excess strands that maybe we don't want anymore. You always got to delete hidden on them. Kind of move it. I'm starting to work on more in the secondary shapes now with some of these skinnier subtools. Now that I got like a base of primary forms, I can take these skinnier strands and kind of start stacking them on top of my primary forms to help try and drive more interesting shapes. I'm still going to be working on my silhouette. I don't think it's there yet, but like we can see right now, these smaller strands really help accentuate the fiber mesh. Taking existing subtools that I had before and moving them around. I mean, I'm not just duplicating more subtools all the time. I'm taking the existing subtools I had and playing them against the new shapes that I've been bringing in. So it's a consistent back and forth between creating new subtools of strands and modifying the existing ones. Huh, that's interesting. Again, that Groom turbulence really helps for breaking up the strands. It's very nice. Trying to get some waviness in my geometry. I also look at it from different perspectives too. Like at this stage, I'm starting to look at it more from the side perspective, because I'm hoping that a more dynamic tapering shape will play nicely against my light setup inside Zbrush. And it is. You can't just have a bunch of flat strands. They need to have some sort of directionality in there. Taking some subtools, kind of pushing them in front of other ones to help add to the depth. Interesting. I'm going to take this small skinny strand and kind of push it down. I'm still looking to create a more interesting silhouette. I'm hoping that, you know, my diffuse is going to drive my alpha. I mean, my diffuse has to line up with the alpha, so thus I need to work on secondary shapes while adjusting and modifying my silhouette. So I'm just trying to look for interesting overlapping shapes, which we're starting to get more of, which is kind of nice. Pushing some subtools back, pushing some forward. I mean, we're going to need to really get some subtools to overlap nicely on one another and have some fall back more. But you can see how we're kind of like building off the base of what we initially constructed. And we're kind of pushing form with these smaller skinny strands. Let's see. Duplicate another small skinny strand. Let's see what we can do with it. Okay. I'm starting to play a lot more with these smaller, skinnier strands to try and get more interesting shapes and forms within this hair texture. I'm really looking to try and push like some nice clumps, some nice forms, while still working on my silhouette, especially the bottom right there. Bottom could use a lot more work. But as I'm working, I'm still playing with some of the BPR settings with these skinnier strands. Some of these skinnier strands, I'm increasing the radius on them just to thicken them up a little bit more. I don't want them as like faint and as soft as some of my initial strands were. So by increasing the radius, I can create more volume on them, despite the fact that they have a lower number of actual geometry strands in the subtool. So I'm still pushing these smaller strands to get more overlapping shapes. Still experimenting, still pushing these overlapping smaller strands. I don't know exactly what my final result should be, but I know what I like because I'm basing these decisions off of photo reference that we evaluated in the previous video. Very interesting. It's interesting that these smaller strands can create a lot of depth when you stack them against your primary thicker strands. There's definitely a sort of logic going on where we have our primary strands that kind of filled the base of it that we worked on earlier, and then as we are building up, we're starting to go from big to small, which can create some nice depth with the shadows and our overlapping shapes. Yeah, that's looking a lot nicer. duplicating another smaller piece and mirroring it. Kind of using standard modeling practices on this too. Using anything I know how to do, anything at my disposal. If I wanna mirror one of these Fibermesh hair strands, I'm gonna do it. Doesn't matter. I mean, it's just geometry. Using the move brush, trying to get like a little flyaway shape in there. Some breakaway flyaways. Could add some more visually interesting shape to my silhouette in alpha. Always rendering, always evaluating what I got. I didn't like that piece, so I deleted it again. Sometimes you gotta duplicate pieces, try them out. Maybe it doesn't work, you delete it, you move on. This could be a cool piece right here. It's kind of a neat chunk. Delete a couple strands out of it. Delete some of that Fibermesh out of there. Interesting. Kind of twisting it with my transpose tool. And pinching it up. Again, pinch tool, very handy. Gotta love it. Let's see if we can get an interesting breakaway shape right here. Some interesting flyaways. Kind of cool. We need to keep working on that silhouette too. Interesting. It's kind of cool. And once I have a strand that I like, there's no harm in just duplicating it and placing it and continuously placing it, We're not limited by our subtools, if ever, so, don't think that you have to make all this work on just one subtool, because as you can see, we're starting to get a pretty big list of subtools. So, don't get overly eager and start duplicating shapes that you don't think you need, or you're not ready to duplicate, but just start methodically and duplicate where necessary and create new shapes. These flyaways are starting to look cooler, a lot cooler. So that's why I'm duplicating them. Trying to create some more interesting breakaway shapes right here. I'll lengthen them even. Yeah, it's looking cooler. It's starting to feel a little bit more natural. Keep playing with these smaller strands. More flyaways. Break up the shape some more. See what we can do with it. Okay. I kind of push that smaller shape behind some of the previous subtools. The reasoning, just to kind of like hide it behind them and kind of have a more interesting alpha. Sometimes with these Fibermesh subtools, you'll be placing them in front of other ones and behind other ones. And a lot of it just comes down to you're trying to make an aesthetically pleasing alpha. Now I'm trying to get some flyaways on the other side too. Let's see what we can do. Again, I'm just moving these how they feel the most natural. Kind of pushing and pulling this whole time. Move tool. Move tool has been our #1 asset in this. Very cool. Pull it out a little bit, maybe stack it on top of a couple of my other Fibermesh subtools. Huh, okay, that's, I don't know if I like that or not. So I'm gonna keep working it. Alright, let's play with some of these inside strands now. You gotta keep evaluating the gesture and the overall forms of these hair strands. We want to make sure that, you know, we're not nitpicking one particular area. We're kind of evaluating the whole thing and working on the whole asset. To kind of taking some of these Fibermesh subtools, kind of pushing some of them in front of the camera and some behind a little bit more, trying to get more of an interesting relationship between the shadows and the light. I mean, a lot of this we're faking it, you know. We're definitely, like, by pushing these subtools in front of one another and behind one another, and by keeping our lighting relatively consistent while further modifying it, you know, we're working towards nicer hair clumps and a nicer light setup. Oh, transposing it now. Transpose tool master. Let's bring it in. It's time to kind of play with the whole shape. At a certain point, it's just nice to be able to, like, abandon all the subtools, affect the whole mesh, and see what we can play with. Transfer pose complete. Let's render it out. Sometimes these changes are slight, but they can make a difference. And we just kind of need to keep evaluating it in the BPR render, because this will eventually become our final texture. Further evaluation. Still not happy with the general silhouette of the Fibermesh cards. So we're going to keep modifying it. I'm looking at these strand subtools from the front and the back, kind of deciding if I can maybe fill in any of the back areas to try and create a nicer silhouette. I duplicated that back subtool just to kind of fill in the areas that I wanted to fill in. I definitely don't want the bottom too wispy. Oh, transpose tool master. Let's bring it in as a one mesh. Here I am trying to modify just that one little area over there. Kind of just generally moving it around, trying to sprucing it up. Send it back over. Let's see what we get. Okay. The changes are slight, kind of small, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. Kind of playing again with some of these smaller strands I had, trying to see how they can maybe help steer some of these strands and shapes into something more interesting. That doesn't look that good. That might have been a step backwards. So let's keep working on that. I'm playing with those kind of back areas a little bit, trying to adjust my silhouette a little bit more. Try and push it in a nicer, more natural direction. I want these strands to feel like they're definitely stacking on top of one another. Alright, another render test. I'm going to pull that flyaway out a little bit more. Try and break up the side a little bit. I'm still at this point working on my silhouette, my alpha. Still not there yet, but we're trying. Another render test. Okay. Probably use a little bit more breakup on the sides. So here I am deleting some of the strands from one of my subtools, deleting them, hiding and deleting. And now I'm going to go in here. And this is a section where I'm going to start actually coloring my strands. Notice here, I grabbed a lighter color and I isolated this strand subtool, and I started painting it just a little bit lighter in value than the rest of the cards. We'll see here in a minute how that compares to the rest of the strands. So here's the strand I just painted, a little bit lighter in value. I'm shrinking it down a little bit. Now let's move it over. Let's do a little render test and see how it compares to the other ones. Awesome. That's a little bit lighter, just a little bit lighter in value. And let's drag it over and let's see how that stacks up on top of our other ones. We're going to kind of like stick it inside a little bit and penetrate it in from the top and pull it out in the bottom. Try and push the depth. But again, the fact that this one strand is a little bit lighter in value and texture than the rest of all of the other ones before it is going to really make it pop against all the other Fibermesh strands and subtools. Let's check it out. Yep, you can see it right there. We're going to push it in a little bit more. We're going to kind of hide it, nest it deep in with some of the other subtools we have. Alright, see how it kind of peeks under some of the other subtools. And maybe we need to use our paintbrush and just kind of darken it up a little bit more. It's going to be a back and forth. We're going to be brightening it up. We're going to be just trying what we can to use our colors to try and push our strands a little bit further now. Oh, adjusting the radius a little bit more. We're going to keep adjusting our radius for these small little strands. You can see on here we've gone to 3.5 in our radius value. And then we're going to duplicate it, because now that we have one small little strand that's lighter in value, I mean, we don't need to recreate this strand again. We can just duplicate it and start moving it around to see what we can pull out of it. If it doesn't work, we'll just delete it and try again, you know. So lighter, small, skinny strand, has a higher radius value. Let's see what we can do with it. We're starting to see a little more color value and breakup now in our BPR render. Not a lot, but you know, we just got to keep pushing it. We're still kind of in the experimental stage. Let's duplicate again. Push and pull it. Trying to get that shape and form. And nest it inside our existing subtools. Let's render out again. Okay. Again with the pinch brush, and actually we just increased the radius now to 4. It wasn't doing the job. It needs to be a little bit more visible, and you can start seeing the color values be a little bit more noticeable now with the lighter value and with the radius set to 4 for that particular subtool. It's just a little bit more noticeable now. We're really trying to play that the lighter value and color along with the lighting and how it plays with the shadows of the other subtools, the lighting that our little light scene is up against. Now you can see that one strand, so it's a bit more noticeable now. It's looking a lot better, and that's the kind of stuff we want. It's not there yet, but those are definitely the results that we're looking at, that we're definitely looking for. So we're adjusting some of our original subtools. Sometimes we just gotta alt select existing subtools and kind of move them around a little bit and get back in there and kind of manually manipulate them. There's no right or wrong way to be moving this geometry around. Oh, yep, definitely, that's looking better. There's no right or wrong way to be moving these subtools and these Fibermesh around. As you can, again, we're pretty much using the same brushes for this entire workflow. A few groom brushes, the move tool, and pinch. It's the same stuff. It's just how comfortable you are manhandling the geometry and really shoving it around. And we're duplicating successful strands. That previous strand, that lighter strand we did, and we increased the radius to 4. It proved useful and it was looking better, so let's just duplicate it and see what we can do by recreating the results elsewhere. So let's kind of drive the outline of the texture and move it and see if we can enhance the existing subtools that we already have in place. See if we can really accentuate the clumps and the forms with these lighter strands. Not yet. So let's kind of keep pulling it out a little bit. Let's do another render. What do we see? Alright. The lighter strands are starting to make a slight difference. They're not as noticeable as we want, but they're starting to get there. You can see how these smaller strands start really breaking up these bigger primary forms that we created initially. The form logic definitely goes bigger to smaller, you know, much larger Fibermesh strands down to smaller Fibermesh strands. We started pretty big, and we were working on really capturing our base silhouette and our alpha, and now that we've captured quite a bit of it, we're getting a little bit smaller by manipulating much smaller strands. And even though we're manipulating smaller strands, smaller subtool strands, we still will be working on our base silhouette. Gonna keep playing with these smaller strands a little bit more. Keep trying to break up some of these bigger primary forms with smaller strands. Yep, right there. That's looking a little bit better. I mean, we're just duplicating the same strands again and again and slightly modifying them. And here I am playing with my light source again. I mean, as we're creating these strands, we got to keep playing with our light source. And we got to keep saving it out too. Always be saving out your light rig that you're creating within Zbrush, because it's definitely worth noting that the Fibermesh cards that we're creating are definitely tied to the lights that we are also authoring. It's important that we keep tuning our lights. Here I'm definitely working on my 2-point light setup. I'm trying to get a nice fill light, and I'm trying to accentuate the shadow details that we have based on the way that I layered my cards along with these 2 particular lights. You know, there's no particular, there is a rhyme and reason as to how I'm placing my lights. You know, they're both coming from the left and right side. They're not directly forward facing. I'm trying to get some shadows in there too, but it's mostly just whatever looks good. Again, this is definitely like a simplified brute force approach. There's not a lot of science here. It's pretty straightforward. As you can see, I'm just tuning, rendering, tuning, rendering. I'm tuning my lights, and I'm just doing another BPR render. And that's hasn't really changed since the beginning of this video. We've been tuning and we've been rendering. I mean, once you have a light set that you do appreciate and that you do like with a Fibermesh that you've been working on, definitely save it out. You don't want to have to recreate it. Here I am scoping out the different angles of my particular Fibermesh strands. And again, I'm moving those smaller little strands, just duplicating them out, moving them around. I'm actually making them even skinnier now than they've ever been. From this point onward, it seems like these strands that I'm duplicating are just getting skinnier and skinnier. And it's probably because I'm layering them on top of my primary shapes of my existing hair cards. I mean, you look at it from the side right now, and it doesn't look super awesome, but when we render it out, it's starting to look pretty awesome. We're starting to see a lot of really cool stuff happening. And we're probably going to need to keep modifying our light source, but for right now, let's just keep playing with some more strands, you know? If we don't like them, we'll delete them. No harm there. You can see with these smaller strands, we're still kind of modifying the silhouette a little bit. Like, will these smaller strands kind of hit the bottom and kind of add a little bit more taper as we adjust the upper areas? Okay, it's looking better. Look at the shadows. Still gotta work on the lights though. The lights are an offender. But we're gonna delete some strands out of the subtool and delete it. Delete hidden. And let's keep modifying. Let's keep going forward. Let's keep moving geometry. You can see that even as I duplicate more strands, I'm still affecting the silhouette to some extent, you know. Now that we're getting into our tertiary detail, we should have our primary silhouette established, but we can still affect the silhouette by adding more flyaways and making it feel just a little bit more natural. Auto mask Fibermesh still on. Every now and then we'll realize that sometimes our auto mask Fibermesh is still on some of our brushes. We gotta turn it off. So here I am, just kind of duplicating some of my middle strands, kind of moving them around a little bit. Why? Maybe I don't want as much depth that was currently showing in my BPR render. Let's take a look at it again. Alright, I definitely kind of filled that area up a little bit. Might have been a little bit too much, so let's delete some of those strands. hiding them. You can hide them some more. And then eventually I'll delete hidden on them. But let's take a look first. Okay, you can see the strands a little bit better per that one subtool. It still feels like a little bit too much. So here I am hiding them, hiding the root again. And I gotta go to delete hidden. Let's take a look again. Alright. Definitely see it a little bit better. Let's duplicate it out. Now let's fill up another area. Maybe if we delete some more strands out of this one particular Fibermesh subtool, we can make it feel just a little bit more natural, with more Fibermesh strands being visible in the final render. Better. But let's get rid of a couple more. I think that was just a little bit too much we had in there. We want to really see those strands in the final render. All right. Looks better. Let's duplicate another small skinny strand, kind of skinny it up a little bit more, just add a little bit more breakup in our hair. Using the groom blower, inflate it out a little bit more. Groom turbulence. We're going to delete some strands out of there. Delete some of that geometry. Oh, there we are, taking the value and lightening it up in value a little bit more. So we grabbed that, we duplicated a new strand, and now we're lightening up in value against the rest to try and make it pop out a little bit more. Let's see how good this looks. Okay. It's a little bit lighter in value. Let's duplicate it again. Move it out a little bit. Move it along the edge, kind of in the mid area of the strand. Just trying to make this area feel a little bit more natural, with some more flyaways kind of nestled deep within. Using the groom blower again, kind of inflate the hairs a little bit along with the groom turbulence to kind of messy it up a little bit. Then I'll reposition it based on what I think is necessary. Let's take a look. Looking better, looking pretty good. Doing some more final tuning on our subtools, but it's pretty darn close. Just some more final subtool adjustments and some Fibermesh adjustments, and I'd say we should start to put it in Photoshop and really view what we got, because we don't know what we have until we put it in game, and to put it in game we got to put it in Photoshop. So I would say just a few final adjustments, and then let's do some renders out of Zbrush into Photoshop. Yeah, that looks pretty reasonable. Got some good clumping in there, some good lighting, some good flyaways. Very nice. Okay, let's do a couple quick adjustments, and let's bring it into Photoshop here. All right, let's do a BPR render right now, and let's grab our mask and our shadows, and we're going to export those out. So BPR render, cool, we got that. Under render, let's drag it over here for a second. We have under render pass, we have our shadow that we just rendered, and we have our mask that we just rendered. This mask is going to aid us in generating an awesome alpha and also masking things in Photoshop. The shadow we're going to be using as a multiply on top of our shaded. Currently though, we rendered our shaded view with shadows on, so we can't export this out at this moment. So what we can do right now is, since we just had a nice BPR render right here, we can export our mask, and we can send this to any directory, but I already have this saved out, so I'm not going to do that right now. Our shadow, we can save this one out, and then our shaded, because this has shadows baked in the image, we don't want it actually. We want to turn them off. So under render properties, under shadows right here, let's turn off shadows. And then let's re-render again. Do another BPR render. And this is what our Fibermesh strands look like without shadows applied to them, which is exactly what we want. So under render pass, let's then export that shaded view out, and we'd export this out to the directory of our choice. Alright, now that we have our three output images rendered out, our render image, our shadow image, and then our mask, we're now going to composite these into one image. So we'll start with our render. Let's drag our shadow. We're just going to copy our shadow and paste it into our render. And let's do the same thing with the mask. Let's close it. So now we have our mask, our shadow, and our render all in one file. Let's create a folder, layer from background. Let's stick our render in here. So now we have one group with a render image. We'll name it Diffuse. So now let's create an alpha for this. We just got a white alpha. We want to place something in our alpha in here, which we already rendered out. So let's copy, Control C, and then let's go dive into our alpha for our map, for our group. Alt click, and let's paste it in here. That didn't work. Control C, paste in, and now you can see that our diffuse now has the alpha, the output image alpha that we desire. And let's put a background in this scene. because we need some sort of background. So let's just grab like an average color. Sure, why not? Brown. And then let's just put it behind it for right now. Okay, cool. So this is our unshaded render for ZBrush. So now let's grab our shadow layer, and stick that under the diffuse group. And now let's set that to multiply. Cool. So now we have the shadow layer on multiply, and we can now see our final render. If you want to tune this at all, you can totally do that. That's gravy. Maybe we want to darken this up a little bit. I don't know. Just kind of depends what we're going for. And now we can export this out